You're watching Cable 8, Greensboro Community Television. Liz Seymour is the former executive director of the Interactive Resource Center, happily retired, is enjoying getting back to her writing and spending time with her grandchildren. Cable 8 sits down with her as she talks about where she's been, her influences, experiences, and her writing.
I grew up in New Hampshire and New England, and then went to college in New England. I've been making my way down the East Coast ever since. Moved to Greensboro in 1979 when my older daughter was just 6 months old, and she's now actually the mother herself of a baby. So I have lived a good part of my life in Greensboro. I've lived in Greensboro longer than any place else. And I think I can begin to call myself a native. Sunday afternoon in August in 1979 was not the best way to get to know Greensboro. It was, I realize now, at the low point for Greensboro's downtown. It was still a very small town, and it was a big town in population, but not very connected with the outside world. And in the 35 years that I've been here, it has just gotten connected in so many different ways, good and bad. But at first, especially for a northerner, for a Yankee coming down, I wondered if I was ever going to actually put down roots, and then I did.
Greensboro has grown a lot since 1979 in its infrastructure and cultural diversity.
When we moved here, the sense I had was that Greensboro was run by a very small number of people who were all connected to each other and who had grown up together, gone to school together, married each other, and there were a few families who were philanthropic and public-minded, but it was pretty insular. And I think there are many more opportunities now for people like me to become connected with the city, even though we don't have family ties here or long-standing relationship with the city. And I think the city has a different kind of civic pride now, and that includes some humility. It's no longer just Greensboro right or wrong. It's now we've got things to learn, we've got problems to solve, we've got people to welcome. One of the things that happened in the 35 years since I've been here, Greensboro has become a much more international city. It was pretty much a city of black and white, and now it's a city with a multicultural ties. And the city could have fought that, but I feel as though, at least officially, and the decision makers have embraced that.
As Greensboro evolved, Liz herself evolved.
I feel as though I'm a little bit like an archaeologist. I feel as though I have lived in a couple of different Greensboros. When I first came here, I was married and had small children, and was building a career as a freelance writer, and I just kind of got to know the sort of public things, the civic things. I sat on some boards, I got involved in some programs, and then as my children got older, and as I got older, my ideas began to change pretty radically. And in my 50s, I became much more radicalized, ending to the point that when my marriage broke up, I turned my house into a collective house. And so I got to explore the kind of the fringes of Greensboro. I got to know Greensboro in a whole new way, including volunteering with a group called Food Not Bombs, and that's how I got to know a lot of people who are homeless. So I feel as though I have had the privilege, continue to have the privilege, of knowing people in a lot of different layers of Greensboro who wouldn't necessarily know each other. And I think knowing each other is where any community starts. Building some true relationships between individuals, not looking at each other as just members of groups that we may or may not trust. So I took those ideas and began to put them in action, and that's how I found myself connecting in places that I didn't even know existed before. I was living, like many people in Greensboro, in pretty constricted social circles and even geographic circles, and now I know the city a whole lot better.
As Liz began to discover different parts of the city, her perception of homelessness changed.
It was just unimaginable. It was hard to imagine what life was like when the bottom has fallen out, and I think that for us Americans, because the American dream is so much tied up with having your own home, having a picket fence and so on, the American nightmare is losing that. And so we become afraid of looking homelessness in the face because there's a little fear in all of us that what would it be like if that happened to me? So I had to overcome that fear, and I didn't know how to talk to people. I didn't know how to see people as individuals. I had to learn that. I had a lot of good teachers, and one of the things that helped me a lot in volunteering with Food Not Bombs is that it is based, one of the principles is that anybody's welcome to eat, but also anybody's welcome to volunteer and cook. And just standing with somebody in a kitchen chopping onions and talking is a great way to get to know people. And I began to see past the tragic sense of loss and see that underneath that is a lot of resilience, a lot of good humor, a deeply connected sense of community among people who are in that situation. Many things that people who are in a more comfortable situation have lost touch with. So I came to really admire people who were navigating homelessness and see that there was that as a community we're losing out on a lot if we just marginalize or write off any group of people.
Through venturing in Greensboro, she eventually became the executive director of the Interactive Resource Center, a day center for those who are homeless or about to become homeless.
Food Not Bombs was invited to serve in the library, the downtown library, which is really unusual. We had been serving outside the library for a long time, and we negotiated with them very easily. They invited us to come in during the winter months and serve in the Nussbaum room once a week. And the only thing they asked was that there be some programming that went along with it, so it could be a legitimate library program. So we started having we called government official night, and once a month would invite city council members and county commissioners to come in and talk and listen. And this was the winter of 2007, 2008. The economy was beginning to get bad. Homelessness was on the rise. It was an issue in every community, and certainly in Greensboro. And the government officials came. It was great. There were city council members, there were county commissioners who made the time to come down and listen. And what was being said over and over again was, you keep passing laws about what we can't do and where we can't be. We've got to be somewhere, and we want to be somewhere that will help us get out of the situation we're in, and we want to be somewhere where we can take a shower, where we can sit when it's raining, where we can get services. Diane Bellamy Small, who was a councilwoman at that time and who had been active in homeless issues, formed a task force. And the task force started meeting in early 2008. And I got involved in that, and also went out and spoke to homeless people and held some meetings at various meal sites and places where people felt comfortable talking freely, and said, and we just kept saying, if there were a day center, what would you like to see in it? And a pretty rapid consensus about it being a place where people felt welcome, felt safe, felt part of a community, could take a shower, a whole list of things, which I'm proud to say the IRC does all of those now. That list became a template back in 2008. So the task force was meeting, but like all task forces, was moving with a certain deliberate slowness. And the need was growing, and I was I was chairing the program committee. We got really excited. We started meeting once a week down at Urban Ministry, and there were a lot of homeless people involved, and saying, okay, what would the daily program be like? What would the functioning of a day center be? So we had this great program all ready to go and no place to go with it. And as the summer of 2008 was coming to a close, Mike Aiken, who is the current head, soon to be retired head of Greensboro Urban Ministry, stated publicly that Greensboro Urban Ministry, Weaver House, had stayed full for the first summer in its history, which meant that the winter was just going to be brutal. And at that point, a discussion began about what to do to provide a safe place for people to sleep during the winter. And out of that came the Winter Emergency Program, which I was very involved in kind of conceptualizing. And the idea was not to find one big gymnasium to put everybody in, just kind of warehouse people, but actually create small communities in churches and in community spaces so that people could have a home for the winter, have a place to develop their sense of community, and do that not just with other people who are homeless, but people who were actually had never been homeless. It became, and continues to be, among other things, a tremendous community education tool. I have heard over and over again from people who are members of the churches that host the Winter Emergency Program that where they used to look away when they saw somebody who looked homeless and just feel a lot of discomfort and I think familiar feelings to people who've never been around homelessness. And now they look to see if it's somebody they know. That's a huge difference. So the Winter Emergency Program was coming together. It was going to provide another 125 beds around the city for people, but there was still no place for anybody to go during the winter. So our little program committee went to the larger task force and said, we would like to do something at least to get people through the winter. We want to do a day equivalent to what's happening with the Winter Emergency Program. And I think other people on the task force were a little skeptical about how possible it would be to put something together that quickly, and rightly so. But we did it, found Bessemer United Methodist Church, got some community support, and opened the doors in January of 2009. By that time, the economy had gotten really bad. Nobody knew where it was going to go or when it was going to end. And we pledged to stay open through the end of March and then go back to planning. But before that winter was over, the gift of the building on Washington Street was made public. So the Strasser family had now made available this 24,000 square foot building. And so we said, well, we'll just keep going. And we did. Raised enough money for the renovation. We were helped out a lot by the city and the county, and also discovered that the IRC was eligible for some stimulus money. So with all of that plus private donations, did the renovations and moved in. Somehow we thought we would be in there like in the fall of 2009. We were in there, I think, May of 2011. It takes a little longer than we thought, but the group of people who brought the IRC together were never short on optimism, and so we found that what we had started squeezed into some Sunday school rooms way out on East Bessemer, about 3 miles outside of downtown, was scalable. The sense of community, the sense of collaboration, the sense of non-judgment can work for 250 people that they see today, as well as it did for 60 or 70 people who we were seeing on Bessemer.